Hello and welcome to another episode of Leaders of Transformation. Today we're going to talk about how to recruit, train, and retain A players. We have Rick Crossland here, and a shout out, by the way, to Podcasting You. I always like to attribute those people that support our podcast and send us amazing guests. And Trevor from Podcasting You introduced me to Rick. And Rick is an internationally known expert and thought leader on A player talent. He spent many years in business, and he's actually been published in leading business sites, Inc.com, Entrepreneur.com, Fortune.com, and he contributes articles as a Fortune insider to Fortune.com. So just has had a lot of experience in finding these A players, developing these A players. And so I'm really excited to have him here because you know what, as a leader of transformation, at some point it's going to go beyond you, right? It has to go beyond you. Otherwise, it's going to be a very small movement. It's going to be a very small impact that you can have. And so in order to have it go beyond you, you got to have the right people on your team in the right seats, doing the right things. And Rick's going to help to show you how to do that. So Rick, welcome to Leaders of Transformation. We're excited that you're here today.
Well, thanks, Nicole. It's wonderful to be here.
Yeah. So we're talking about A players. So how do you start off with the basics, how do you define an A player?
That's pretty straightforward. So we define an A player as top 10% of the industry for the salary that you're offering, somebody that you would enthusiastically rehire. So if you look at your existing team, your A's, B's, and C's, your A's would be your enthusiastic rehires. Said another way, if they left, you'd be crying. So enthusiastically rehire without a doubt. And the final thing is they have to fit your core values. One of the things I hear often is a myth about A players is they have to be A-type personalities. That's not true. They can be all personality types, but they have to model your core values. And different organizations, and I think this is fascinating, have different core values, which is that small set of rules that make everything work. So different organizations, sports teams versus a conservative organization versus a more avant-garde organization will have different rules and mores, but the key is that A player models your core values.
Got it. Well, that just reminds me of a client I had years ago who they were real high performers, move fast, change things fast. They make decisions like we're going this way. Okay, no, we're going that way. And they were in the financial services business. And so that worked for them and they were very successful. But the people on their team, some of them were like analysts and thinkers. So that's a whole different animal. And they had a particular person that was working for them that was struggling to keep up with their pace, trying to do excellent work, which he really did want to do, but keep up with their pace of change and their expectations. And they ended up firing him. And I did before we had a chance to really talk, I was like, hey, hang on a sec. But they're like, nope, just fired. I'm like, okay. So, so I did an exit interview with him. And one of the things that I really wanted to make sure that he understood that it wasn't that something was wrong with him, that he wasn't good. It was not a good fit culturally. And so I encouraged him because he was questioning whether or not he was good enough to get a job in this industry and, working for somebody else. And I said, no, I think there's a different environment that will work better for you. And he ended up doing that. He ended up getting a job in the bank, which is a little bit slower pace. They do things that process slower. And he has been doing amazing in that role. So he's an A player on that team, but not the initial team. And so so there's that aspect of making sure that you're actually on the right team for what you bring to the table. So I'm glad you mentioned that.
Well, you know what? You raised about 10 excellent points right there. So we have a core belief that everybody deserves to be an A player somewhere. It might not be on our team. Now, in my organization, I do a lot of recruiting in addition to strategic planning and coaching. I hire very young people and they are coached 24/7. So if you don't like being coached all the time for performance, my culture wouldn't be good. So, it's very when you hire for people, you always hear, do I hire for skills or do I hire for attitude? I say hire for culture. So in your example, where you had that culture that pivoted all the time, you need agility. And if someone is going to grouse and be down all the time because of those strategic pivots, it's not good fit. So the candidate, as well as the leader, you have to be ultra clear on your culture and describe that. And I say to candidates, once they sign up, you knew the terms of the deal. And unless, and the great leaders, back to a transformative culture, you need to be very transparent of what's going on. If you have cash flow problems and your hair's on fire all the time about cash, you need to disclose that to your candidate. They can't think you have a great income statement, a strong balance sheet, and then come in and understand that it's a different deal. So all that stuff fortifies an organization in a more clear. And you might find that there's people who like that kind of hair on fire organization, to each their own.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And you know what? Like crisis centers, certain people would thrive in that environment, and certain people would be in crisis. And
Right. Be in
so that wouldn't
therapy
work.
over it.
Yeah, they're going to need to get some help. So it's possible, obviously, then to build a solid team of 8 players. But why do we hear so much talk about you can't find good talent, especially we're in the U.S.
Hmm.
And so in particular in this market, we hear that. And of course, I'm from Canada, so I heard that there too, but North American market, that it's like, we just can't find good people. We just can't find good people. What would you say about that?
Right. So when we first chatted, we were talking about transformational leadership, and I definitely want to keep going back to that theme. I would say, relative to leadership, there's nothing more transformational than building a team of 100% A players. So another question you might ask is 100% doable? Short answer is yes, but you always need to be striving. So there are a lot of teams in high 80s, 90% A players. Inevitably, the job of the CEO, the job of the leader, is to leave that legacy of great people around you. And to do that, that simply means the number one job of the CEO needs to be talent. Easily said, not as easily done. I had a leader in this morning with his team. We were working on sales. He stuck around. We're actually looking for 10 consultants for him. And as we're doing this, it was very clear. He said, I'm not spending enough time on that. I said, you know what? You're right. And we talked about, the amount of reviews. You need to get very intimate with the candidates. You need to understand who's out there. You need to understand your price points. I don't recommend you do salary studies. Go and hook into a couple of good people. We hire for passive candidates. We are recruiters as well. The way we structure it, we give our clients an extremely good deal. And so it becomes effective and affordable, but they're seeing more talent because we're rifle shotting. We are going after specific people. Where people get it wrong and where they can't find the good talent is they're settling for B players. And if you think of it this way, they're looking for these big name industries, they're looking for these big name companies, and then they're getting hoppy people. We defined a hopper, somebody moving every year, 18 months, 2 years, and they're going to do it to you too. So they get these folks, they don't perform, and then they end up being dissatisfied. In fact, don't feel so bad, because 80% of businesses get their hiring wrong, right? So 8 out of 10 hirers aren't those A players they thought they were getting.
Wow.
So you have to be very surgical who you're looking at. You need to talk to a lot of people. And I really like the A potential in this market, right? So in 2019, we're getting more junior people who have a glide slope up, and we're picking them at an affordable price point, and then we need to developmental systems, which you can also talk about. That is a much better way to go than getting a B player, is get that A potential. And usually, if you're doing software sales, maybe you're getting someone from staffing, for instance. It's not quite as elevated, no offense to the staffing people out there, but usually solution sales is viewed as a higher end than staffing. We'll get a good person who's an A player at staffing at affordable price point and develop them.
Okay, so what I just heard you say there is get an A player in staffing, and then the A player in staffing will help you to build the rest of the team.
Actually, I was using a little different analysis. Internal
Okay.
recruiters are a great way to go. Partnering with the CEO to get more talent in your door, have a lot of proverbial coffee, bring a lot of candidates into your organization.
Hmm.
By the way, your team will also say, who are all these people? And just like, a basketball coach or a head football coach, they're always bringing in new recruits. Well, that keeps your existing team honest. Where I was actually going with that point was, a lot of cases, if you're in one industry, there's a couple of subordinate industries to you that might be suppliers and feeders that are typically viewed as a little bit subordinate to your industry. as opposed to trying to get that A player out of your industry. Now, if you can do it, that's fine. But what you typically find is you're getting the B players from your own industry. Get a feeder industry to you where you can get A potentials. And the
Got
reason
it.
they're A potentials is they haven't proven themselves in your industry yet, but their trajectory, their glide slope is very promising. And then you need to develop them and they can be an A player on your team.
That's interesting because several people, and you mentioned software, several people that I've had on this show who have a background in tech were actually, and I said to them, how did you get into that? Women in tech, and very, very successful. One of them worked at Compaq and helped to grow it to 15 billion. These are like, now she consults and so forth. And a lot of them actually got into tech by accident
Mm-hmm.
through another industry,
Right.
exactly what you're saying. And they're superstars, but they never had a plan and didn't come out of university thinking I'm going to go into software sales or whatever the case may be. So that's very, very interesting. So you recruit them, and then you've got to train them. So let's
Right.
talk about that piece, because we also see, I'm sure you've seen this, I've seen this with clients, is that they'll get A players on their team and then they don't know what to do with them. And then A players don't like hanging around in environments that don't have the structure for them to be successful, if that makes sense. I mean, they're going to be
Correct.
successful to a certain point anyway, because they just are. But you're talking about A player potential. They need some structure. They need help to be able to be developed into that strength.
Right. So a couple of key tools. We have something called an A-player agreement. You can find that on my website, aplayeradvantage.com. That is a job description on steroids. One of the problems that we found, and on podcasts I'm on, the leader typically doesn't know the job of the people that they're hiring for. So they need to know it intimately. And this has 3 to 5 major roles broken out daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly in terms of performance, all with as many numbers as possible on that sheet. So lead measures, critical numbers. And when you do that, you set an expectation. So on the recruiting side, my team typically gets 12 candidates an hour. Those are people they're reviewing with me, and that is fantastic yield. Most people I know don't get that kind of yield. Well, we have training systems. We actually have a playbook on how to get that kind of yield. So a couple tools, a player agreement, and then a playbook for each major division in your organization. That's the how-to guide. So we want to give how-to guides on how to be an A player. And it's a total game changer. When you're talking to candidates, they may have not ever seen this level of training. And we are talking about training on a budget, right? We are talking about stuff that you're building that becomes differentiating activities to your organization versus your competition. I have one client, their goal was to get a software consultant field ready in 6 months. They literally built a training matrix, all the key training modules on the left side, and then what needed to happen week 1, what needed to happen 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, and 6 months. And you know what happened? So they were targeting 6 months. They actually achieved 3 months. And
Wow.
that has been a game changer. And in terms of profitability and so forth, a huge advantage versus their competition. And they can then get younger, more affordable talent and say, we basically built an internal university. And if
Yeah.
you think the schools are training your candidates, think again. You are the school. The university is just a rubber stamp at this point. All the skill sets, whether it's finance, sales, manufacturing, operations, are actually coming from businesses. So the quicker you build pretty much a university style curriculum, and get people competent in that, and then as they perform, have different levels of A player agreements where we like to promote people. We don't like to give cost of living adjustments. We like to promote people.
Oh, great distinction there. So coming back to what you were saying about the university that you develop, how much of it is product and service education versus the quote unquote soft skills, emotional intelligence, leadership skills? How much of it is how does it weighted?
Mm-hmm.
And then what are some of the, obviously this is industry specific, right? These are they need to know what you do, how to do it well, and all that. On this side, what are some of the things that you've found that have been very successful?
That's a great question, Nicole. So conventional wisdom is, and if you look at most people's training, because I'll have a client bring your training, and I did this morning, and it's all industry specific. The blend that you want is really about a 50-50 between technical and the leadership skills. So we were training in sales today. Most of it, this was a technology company, was on their technology. What I was bringing to the party as their coach were selling tools. And I had a very good audience for this. They were very eager, like, wow, that's how you run a pipeline. Wow, that's how you handle objections. And we were building a playbook. We were actually outlining the table of contents to a playbook. And our playbooks are very simple. They're an inch binder. They have those 18 tabs in them, and write out a table of contents on what they need to learn. And it needs to be a mixture. Typically, the playbook will almost 100% be soft skills, how to do this, what's your sales process, all these different things. If it's, technical skills, how do I have a monument company, how do you do a granite carving? And there's not a lot of public domain information. So that's where we're the university. You want it to be your way to do it. Take Boston Beer Group, right? Their critical thing as you look at their flywheel is hops. The hops of the beer differentiates them. That's why all their beers taste great, because they have special technologies in terms of the hops and also how they brew. So they have perfected that, and then they hire good people to implement their systems.
Brilliant. So then now you've got this university, you've got the culture. So first of all, I heard, okay, so culture, make sure it's a right fit. You bring these people on that have potential, and you can get them at a great price point.
Mm-hmm.
And then because it is potential, and then you have this university and you train them up. How do you keep them?
The development piece, and, most of those cases, it's a growing organization. I have a lot of clients where the core teams, I'm a scout leader, so maybe that just naturally came, but I have a lot of super successful people who are under 30 years old running. I'll talk of one guy, Andy. I don't think he's 30 yet. He's running $35 million division at his company. And if we were on the open market for Andy, he'd be a lot more expensive. Now, at 30, he's progressed with the company. So you got to put your money where your mouth is. If people are moving and they see a future, and you can actually coach them pretty hard and put pretty heavy expectations against them, as long as they see a pathway. And a lot of times, what people say and what they do are two different things. People are actually fairly incongruent, but the congruent ones are typically your A players. So if you say,
I can't hear you.
how's that?
That's good.
Can we redo it?
Yeah, you can back up. Back up to. It's typically they're incongruent. Typically, your A players are congruent. Right
Okay.
after that.
Would you want me to go a little more further back?
Sure. Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So you ask about development. Okay.
Yeah, you can just go back to, if you want to go back to, you were talking about most people are incongruent, but it's your A players that are going to be incongruent.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. Yeah. Sorry, I hit a little button inadvertently.
That's
so okay. Most people are pretty incongruent. They'll say one thing, say in a quarterly planning meeting, and then execution is a totally different animal. But your A players are your most congruent. So if you lay out development steps they need to take, reviewing modules, learning skills, and you need to have the content for them. It could be, even third-party content that you curate, but your A players are going to actually do that. And as they do that, you're going to get the force multiplier. More work will be done at higher margin, less errors, more throughput, whatever you're looking for. You need to measure those bottom line productivities. And when they achieve those, right, they become more valuable to you. So you then need to, that's where we look at those levels. If you're a project manager level 2, you need to be very clear to leader what level 3 looks like. And you could set the bar high, and you can hold that over them that, I need to see this. I also need to see this kind of profitability or efficiency from your department. Back to leadership, I need you to coach up that B player on your team or coach him or her out and replace. All those are fair game, but when they do that, that's when we promote. And a lot of cases in these growing organizations, there's so much opportunity created by the team. It's not the industry that's driving the business, it's the team performance that's enabling the growth.
Right. So they're actually, in a healthy way, competing against themselves within the team to say, how can we be better? How can we be the best in the industry? Because, who doesn't like to be on a winning team. I mean, you see this in sports all the time. Everybody's like, we won. Well, you didn't do anything. You sat on the bench, bought a
Right.
ticket. But in this case where it's like, yeah, people do want to be on that winning team. Now let's shift gears for a moment and talk about those B players and C players. Like you said in the beginning, everyone I think deserves to be an A player on a team, but not everybody will be. Now, obviously there are certain people that they don't want to, there's other stuff going on, right? They don't want to work hard, or they don't, but I really do believe that the core, that people do want to be valued for being valuable. They do want to do well somewhere. I mean, who doesn't feel good about doing well? So what would you say to the B players and the C players, or the people that they're like, yeah, but I want to give them a chance?
Mm-hmm.
How do you
So
give them
fair
a
point.
chance?
Yeah, fair point. And kind of embedded in your question was, there's still this doubt, on a team, can I really have 100% A's? So you absolutely can. For those B players, I use coaching terminology like, I need you here, right? Here's where I need you in the next 90 days. What I find, strategic planning is viewed as development for people. We do it quarterly, right? So they're always part of it. It's a seat at the table. I like to start small, but then expand that tent. So let's say a B player is invited into the tent. We're going to give him or her specific achievements in those 90 days, right? We're looking for people to add value on top of their day job. If they don't do that, however, let's say we need to improve sales by $500,000. They have no plan. They can't think of a plan. If they think of a plan, they don't execute. Then we're going to allow them to explore free agency. Now, you might be asking yourself on this podcast as a leader, well, oh my goodness, I can't find good people. That's where you need to be just like an NCAA coach, and you need to recruit just as well as a Nick Saban or a Mike Krzyzewski. And, back to how much they're doing it, they are in the living rooms of college athletes and their parents all the time. Those multi-million-dollar coaches are texting 18-year-olds and 17-year-olds all the time, talking about the opportunities at those top elite programs. And this goes for the top 100 college programs in both basketball, football, and other sports. They are more serious about recruiting than most CEOs are. So you need to have that credible threat of doing better. Where you see a leader flounder is they're settling it, because we teach what they tolerate. And a lot of times there's not that courage to tell somebody, you're not an A, you're a non-A player. I need you to become an A. Here's what I need you to do by when. And that conversation never happens. When you have that conversation, it is freeing for everybody. It is a fair game. You want to be kind and all that, but we deserve A player performance. And A might only cost you 5%, if any, or maybe 10% more. If you have 8 people on a team and you cut 1 C, you are still, your salary headcount and your salary cap is much better off with 7 A players than it is with 8 mixtures of A's, B's, and C's. Try it on a spreadsheet if you don't believe me. Pay your A's about 10% more, and the math always works. So we treat it just like a sports team. We have a salary cap, and we'll simplify the income statement for a team, and we'll show them the total, like a $20 million business might have a $4 million payroll. Most businesses never show their people that. So the people feel like they're on the inside, like $4 million. Then they look to the left and to the right, and they're like, where are the C players? Because that's a lot of money. And people know. And you made a point earlier, A players do not want to work with B's and C's. They're repellent to your A players.
Yeah.
They want to work with people who challenge them, so they do the best work. The organizations that I work with, we like to pay bonus. And we pay out the bonus quarterly. We like to do 10% quarter 1, 20% quarter 2, 30% quarter 3, and then 40% quarter 4. So there's always that's a nice period
Good
to have
incentive.
a goal.
Yeah.
And you have and people, there's earned, not given. When they make that bonus, it's earned, rather than doing some kind of schmaltzy party that they're really not bought into. If they really earn the event and there's checks being handed out, and we pay A's twice the bonus of a B. And if the B stays a B, they're not going to get bonus. We're gonna upgrade.
Yeah, got it. Well, what I heard in there is, there's a saying, of course, this well, I'm sure, is always be closing, always be selling. In this case, I hear always be scouting, always
Right.
be scouting. So, and that's a job. And it's interesting, yeah, because usually it's only when they when somebody leaves, or somebody is really at that point where it's like unbearable, it's intolerable at this point now, we need to get somebody, otherwise it's status quo, and it's just like, oh, maybe they'll get better, maybe, do another performance review and have a little conversation with them, but it's not really a performance conversation like what you're talking about. And then eventually it's like, oh, we need to do something. And finally it's uncomfortable enough that they have to do something about it. Or somebody leaves and then they've got to replace them. And then they start like, oh crap, now I've got to look around and find something. And then they scramble to find somebody. So yeah, really, really great distinction there. So you mentioned about sports teams, and I know that you talk about this, is like, what can we learn from sports teams? Is there anything else? We talked a little bit about it already here. Is there anything else that we can learn from sports teams in terms of building that A player team?
Yeah, just a couple that come from mind. First of all, they have playbooks, right? So these core processes in your business, if you want to add a lot of value to your business, document it. And I like to call them playbooks because they're more active and they're not stale documents. Our playbooks are used all the time and they're updated continuously. So we have our teams looking at the playbooks all the time. A couple of our teams actually, pay for contributions. So if they build a system, maybe it's a $150 gift card or something like that. By the way, it's the cheapest money you'll ever spend. And, when they come to you, how do I do something? No, it's in tab 7 of the playbook. And, it really works out well. So that's one. Think about practice, right? Sports teams have to practice all the time. We demand more from high school kids on a football team. I like to say when it matters like sports, they're doing 2-a-days in 90-degree weather in August. Uh, when's the last time your sales team role played, for instance? When's the last time you practiced your proposals? When's the last time you took a writing course to sharpen up your proposals? When's the last time you did a real lean project that had a gain on your manufacturing system? So again, talk is cheap, but actually going through these and making improvements is a totally different story. So practice, process improvement, coaching,
Mhm.
peer coaching, external coaching. Are people reading outside? Everybody wants to go to fancy training courses. A knowledge you can garner in a $20 book is phenomenal.
Mhm.
Do they write a little report or do a presentation to your team when they read a book? Do you give them a $100 gift card when they do that? That counts as development and training.
Got it. So do you actually have, speaking of books, do you have particular books that you like to encourage your clients to read, or have their team read?
Yeah, I
There's so
do.
many books out there. Yeah.
I'm going to give a shameless plug to mine because I wrote it for that purpose. So the A player, and the thing is, the book works too well. I just had a CFO read the book today. He took the day off. I guess he really liked it. He just sent me a note right before this podcast. He goes, unbelievable book. I took my day off. I invested in myself and I read it in 6 hours. Here's my takeaways. I said, Bill, fantastic. I appreciate an Amazon review. So the A player teaches people how to be that A player. One point of caution, the leader needs to read the book first, because if you're recommending books you haven't read, you're always in trouble as a leader. Never do that. So read first, or at least scan any reading that you're going to recommend. So I like the A player for that. I like Scaling Up by Vern Harnish, which talks about how to scale a business. It talks about A players, also talks about financials, cash flow, strategy, and execution. And both those are pretty motivating books. It shows businesses a new light. Another one that comes to mind is Great by Choice. That's my favorite Jim Collins book because it's aimed at the mid-market companies, these gazelles that are growing fast that really employ most people in the United States and Canada. One final one, and then we'll go to another topic, is No Excuses by Brian Tracy. One of my favorite things there is, a lot of people grouse, well, somebody else is being paid more at my organization. Well, do you think maybe they're being added more value? Now there's nepotism and other crazy things going on, but you really need to look at that payroll and make sure that you got it right. And if someone else is making more money, what can you do to add more value? And it also gets people out of that looking for a 3% cost of living entitlement, which most of my businesses don't do. We want to promote. We're not looking. You see, the thing is, everybody does annual reviews. They're done bad. You've already made the compensation decision before that, and it's kind of walking through the motion. And I was at a number of Fortune 500 companies, including Ford Motor, included limited brands, and the comp was decided because I saw it in my paycheck before I had my performance discussion. So
Yeah.
that's just wrong. And everybody's bad at performance reviews. Take the A player agreement and do performance reviews at least quarterly with a weekly coaching conversation. Know your numbers. Do you know if one of your employees had a good week or not? You need to know the numbers at that level so you can coach and make adjustments on a weekly level, not an annual.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. Well, and so you talked a little bit about it. Yeah, you were at Ford, you were at other companies. So how did this become such a passion for you? Obviously, you're an A player. Some point you developed into one. So give us a little bit of a backstory on how this became so passionate. Where now this is the thing. This is
This is
what
my
you do.
livelihood. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Well, thank you, and thanks for that compliment. I actually had an executive coach at Ford Motor. We did what they call the 9-box methodology, and how you do a 9-box is you take a graph and you make 9 boxes in there. The best place to be is that 9th box. So on the horizontal axis, it's this way rather, is potential, and then the top axis is performance. A better way to do that is actually core values and performance. So I was at the top of the 8th box. They wanted me to have a little more polish, and my issue was, according to my boss, was I need to make my boss's boss my idea is his idea. And so Harry came in and he said, "Listen, here's the problem. You might not, you're about as intelligent as your boss, but you're smarter than your boss's boss. You need to make it his idea." And so I got to work with Harry, my coach, for about 6 to 9 months. Pretty quickly in the engagement, I moved to the 9th box. So I just got, my EQ went up. My IQ was the same. I just got a little bit more savvy and took some of the rough edges off. And I'm a tennis player. I play with a little bit more finesse, a little less power. So I wouldn't be hitting the ball long as often and keep the ball in play. And that made all the difference. And the quick backstory is I always looked at Harry and thought he had the coolest job in the world. And you know what? I was an A player at Ford. Even though we set the profit records at limited brands, I was probably a B player in retail. I mean, I wasn't as passionate about retail. I enjoyed it. We did some good work there, but I got the chance to explore free agency. And I said, you know what? 12 years ago, I said, I'm going to bet on myself. And, it was like launching a rocket. The first couple of years were a little slow, but it took off. And now I have clients around the country and occasionally around the globe, and it's been a lot of fun. And it's fun to create and share. And my goal is very quickly an organization improves their culture, improves their performance.
Yeah, well, it's so important. I mean, like I said in the beginning, I mean, you cannot fulfill a vision and a mission on your own. You have to have a team in order to do it. So you can be this great visionary leader or entrepreneur that dreams up this amazing thing that you're going to change the world with, but you've got to have that team in place to be able to support it. And that's where I think a lot of big dreams actually fall on the, end up in the grave because of that, and then they give up and they're like, okay. It's like they're a good achiever, but they're not a good leader. So A players, speaking to that actually, A players, you made the transition from being an A player achiever to be an A player still achiever, but now a leader and a mentor. Right. So it's like
Right.
the top salesperson that gets promoted to management. Right.
Hmm.
And then like falls on his behind because that's not his skill set. His skill set's, here. Can you talk about that? Because that happens a lot, right? They take
Right.
their A players from one area and then they promote them and then they fall apart. So can you talk a little bit about that process and when to know when to do that and when not to do that?
Hmm. You know, we don't run into that problem a lot. The A player agreements, which again is a job description on steroids, we're really spelling out what the role is, right? So you look at those core competencies of people in terms of, if it's operations, operational knowledge, being able to document how to hold people accountable. If it's sales, I mean, obviously there's those crafts, right? So the key is in an organization, I mean, what you're talking about is cross-developing people. And if you have strong systems, it really makes it easier, right? And you can, I think the best way to do it is you don't give somebody the whole job at once, right? You end up giving them a fraction of the job. And then it becomes a lot more organic. So to be candid, Nicole, that really has not been an issue. We also have a lot of transparencies. Our quarterly plans are online in the cloud. All of our key people see them. Our A player leaders, our best leaders are cascading those down. So you've got a lot of interesting people who now are starting to understand how the business works.
Mm,
And the teams that I coach are amazingly young. And a lot of these young people just want to know how business works because it's not taught. I have an MBA from Duke. The way most mid-market profitable businesses, maybe 10% net margin and better, that's our goal, by the way, for all businesses is better than 10% net margin because you really become an investment grade business. You have a lot of cash. It's like Christmas every day is what a client told me the other day. When you have that, you're able to do that. You're able to do the development. You want to train like the Army. I know we mentioned sports, but whether it's a sports team or the Army, I mean, you don't jump out of you don't parachute without a lot of at least 3 weeks of training is what the Army gives you to jump out of an airplane for the first time. And, most businesses aren't training nearly to that level. So finance skills are eminently learned. That's probably the one that I love to cross train on the most, because when you have your salespeople, your marketing people, and your ops people who now understand financial acumen, oh my goodness, what a way. And, back to that goal of better than 10% net margin, people understand exactly the levers to pull to achieve it.
yeah,
So that's how you get an
got
ops
it.
person to then get in there, because you can teach balance sheet. You can do that. You can use some outside resources to also help.
Yeah, so it actually then becomes, if they are promoted to a management position, then it's actually a natural progression. They've already developed those skills and been trained up into that. I mean, we see that how often where companies, promote managers that really don't know how to manage and they have no idea, and so they're just throwing them into the fire. So that's a great distinction. One of the other things that I wanted to talk about before we wrap up here, you
Mhm.
mentioned it
Can I
briefly.
follow up on that as
Sure.
well?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I heard one of your other podcasts, and the guest was talking about, preparation for that. When you have a coaching culture, because coaching now is viewed as the highest form of leadership, right? I'm in the trenches alongside you. I'm showing you how to do this. I'm not telling you. I'm mentoring. I'm showing you how it's done, and I can do it myself. Back to congruence, that's an extremely congruent point. So if you have that, you are getting younger people exposed to leadership, really good leadership competencies early on, and the strategic plan and the core values. And you're going to get that. And most of us, I mean, we want to promote those people. We want to do it internally. By the way, that's a way to retain people. If you can show credibly that you can promote people, that excites people. Even the people who aren't necessarily getting a promotion see that it's viable.
Yes, yes, yes. And it's eliminating these silos of, sales, just know sales, or this, that. Like, you're actually teaching them about the business as a whole, so they see their contribution, how their contribution affects the whole. And it's like they're bought in. They're like, this is legitimately like a team.
Right.
We're in this together. A lot of, everybody says that, but most companies don't actually operate like that. So great distinction. One last thing before we wrap up is the globalization, right? So
Mhm.
you mentioned about you having some global clients. Do you notice that it's different in the North American market as opposed to other markets in terms of recruiting great talent, finding the ease of finding good talent? There's also a lot of talk about, talent is moving, we're losing a lot of, because we're not training them up.
Mhm.
So yeah, just talk about that globalization.
We do look at international candidates, and with some of the big data tools out there, and let's just take LinkedIn as one of those, you actually see more consistency with profiles than you would think. So it's been actually pretty consistent. I mean, it's been really good in the States the last couple of years. I mean, and I work with a lot of Australian people. I have a couple companies that are Australian and American. And what's actually interesting is that the North American business chassis is the one that Europe, uh, and most of Asia is still modeled after, right? So English being the universal business language, I do see a lot of similarities in there. I'm not an expert in government affairs, so some of the labor laws and all that I leave to those folks. But an A player is an A player universally. I find that to that CEO or CFO who read the book today in 6 hours, it's an appealing concept, right? People want to be an A player. There are a lot of myths around it about tolerating Bs, and I'm going to get my lot of Bs. But if you really are building that team of A players, and a win for the organization is your percentage of A players grows every year. Maybe you're at 50 this year, you grow it to 65. You will see it's like the lights come on. People get so excited and engaged about being around better talent and getting pushed in a good way by their peers and really building something special. And I find that globally, that goes over extremely well. And the term A player is getting noted internationally. My book and some books that are even bigger than mine in terms of distribution are talking about A players.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, Rick, thank you so very much. Now I know you have, you've got the book, A Player Advantage. We'll make sure that aplayeradvantage.com, that's in the show notes as well. They can get your book there. You also have a link where they can go to get some additional offers. Can you talk a little bit about that and
Yeah.
what they'll find there?
Yeah, thank you. The book's The A Player. You can find that on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. On the website, aplayeradvantage.com, if you go /podcast offers, we have some really nice podcast offers in there. There's a business assessment that will help your business. There's actually an offer to do a $100 accountability training, A Player Accountability, that's online course through the A Player University. And then if this is appealing to you, I'm offering a half-hour coaching session, which is easily a $750 value. So, I just encourage people to utilize the tools, take me up on those. Like I said, the book almost works too well. So, take advantage of those, and we want to be a resource to folks. This is a lot of fun to do. It's a pathless challenge, right? The easy path is to take the gravel paved path. This is the one that has the vines, but it's the more challenging trail. And when you come back to base camp, you're going to have a stronger business because you took the more challenging trail.
Brilliant. Awesome. Thank you so very much, Rick. I appreciate you. And I appreciate our listeners for being here. Yeah, go get a copy of A Player, and we'll make sure all the links are in the show notes. Get a copy of, take advantage of the offers that he's given out here. The thing is like I said, I keep driving home that point. You're not going to be able to reach your mission and your vision and fulfill it without a great team behind you. So this is a piece that it may be a little bit harder, may take a little bit more work, but it's going to be so very worth it in the long run. So I encourage you that leaders of transformation take action. So this is the action. Take action. Be an A player yourself, and then attract A players to your team. We encourage you to do that. We look forward to hearing your comments. You can find us on social media. Of course, you can go to leadersoftransformation.com, join our community. And we'd love to hear how this has impacted you and what you're doing in the world to make a greater impact. If there's any way that we can help you in doing that, let us know. So we appreciate you, and we look forward to seeing you in the next episode of Leaders of Transformation real soon.